Hey guys, welcome to today's podcast where we're going to have guest Ann Smith and her husband Nelson. Ann is the author of Recalibrated, and it's going to be an amazing story that they're going to share with us today about how they met, their marriage, their PTSD that they went through together as a couple, how they survived it, and how you can survive trauma and healing in your marriage too. Guys, before we dive into that today, I want to make sure you guys know about the Men's Alliance National Rally. It's going to be May 2nd through 4th here in Richmond, Virginia. Go to our website, get your tickets. It's at Pocahontas State Park. We got Greg Kokel, Stephen Mansfield coming to speak. Get your tribe and road trip to the rally. It's going to be a great time. All right, stay tuned for Ann and Nelson Smith.
We've had a lot of people coming up to us privately too, even on the playground at the kids' school. You know, got people coming up, hey man, I'm going through something with my wife right now. You know, can we go get lunch? Several people. And so like, that's worth it. That's what we said. Cause it's like, well, you know, the First Lady endorsed the book, and I sat down a couple months ago with the governor, and I said, hey, you know, your bride's coming to speak at this event. He's like, yeah. You sure you want to put that book out there? It was just a, you know,
yeah,
right. Not that
it's a little scary being vulnerable.
Yeah, right. It's like,
and it's also rare.
Well, I told her, take it easy on me. But at the event, I remember, I think I said this. I said, you got to be pretty bad husband if your wife writes a book about it. So,
yeah, right.
It's like, but no, it's
either a good one or a bad one.
It's,
you know, or both.
Yeah, but the fruit is that people are reaching out. So
yeah,
it's worth it then.
You know, that's, you know, our motto in Men's Alliance is tribal, rugged, real, and that's the real part. And you know, whenever we launch a new tribe anywhere, as we were kind of talking about earlier, I always tell the tribe leader, like on like night one, you've got to be real. Like you better be sharing and be authentic. If you act like you're fine and you're just going to lead a Bible study, then nobody's going to be real, right? You set that tone right off the bat. But if the leader on night one is like, I'm struggling with alcohol or whatever, man, people are like, okay, all right, I guess we can share too. I guess we can be real too. So, you know, I think you guys have just kicked that door wide open about, man, we're real about some of our marriage struggles.
She was talking to me for years about writing a book because I was in the Army for 20 years and I was on a team for 15 of that. At the height, you know, say I'm a GWAT baby.
Yeah.
Forged and born in war.
What year did you enter active duty?
I started the Q course, Special Forces. I went through selection, which is there's a very beginning just to see if you have what it takes to like start training. In 1999, February of 99. And then I finished the Q course, graduated in the summer of 2001.
And right before.
And I got assigned to the 5th Special Forces Group, which we were the first ones to go into Afghanistan. Like, we carried a piece of the World Trade Center in with us, and my team was the one that took Hamid Karzai, who was the president at the time. Like, my team took Kandahar when the North had fallen.
You guys were you all on horseback?
No, we were in trucks.
Okay.
Yeah, the guys up north got they got the horses, which I don't mind.
I was just wondering if you were in that cool group.
Yeah.
No,
I think it might have been a different book if you.
Yeah, right. We had stolen. We took the Taliban trucks. They they were covering them with mud. I'd never seen that before. So the aircraft couldn't see them. So I'm driving like a stick shift. You know, the European style Toyota, where the gear shifter's on the left. So everything's opposite on donkey trails. Yeah, I was an E5. You think you're a big, brand new Green Beret, right? Save the world. And when you look back, as men, we're I don't know, terrible growing up. It takes a long time, but I always say I couldn't find my butt with both hands back then, but you thought you could do it, right?
Oh yeah.
So, at any rate, yeah, the whole thing. So if you do an arc over that from 2001, then my team, we came back in May of 2002, and then we deployed to go into Iraqi freedom in January of 03. So just a few months later, boom, I went into, my team was literally, at that time I got put on triple nickel, 555. And my team was the first to go into Iraq, like to touch down before the war started. And so there was no time to think about things, you know. I do know that there was anxiety that I had, you know, like there's a terrible event that happened in 2001. Lost a lot of friends and lots of Afghans. But yeah, and then you keep going, right? Then you've got like Iraq. You got all the different books that were written about it, right? American Sniper. I mean, I was in Baghdad in 04. 04, 07, and keep going. All the way up until the Syrian conflict. You know? So it's just write a book. I'm like, yeah. And then finally I just said, why don't you write a book? And yeah.
How many times did you deploy?
Combat 7.
Wow.
But you know, you got all as you guys know, it was funny because I remember at the time the SOCOM commander said that SOF was fraying around the edges because we were just going. So they started this thing called dwell time. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. That's
what they counted towards, like combat deployments. And then when you're dwelling at home, that was like they're monitoring it. No, they didn't, because they didn't count the training. You know, so you got to go. We're a dive team.
Yeah, all the spin up.
You got to go and do all the training and all the shooting skills and your professional military education, you know.
Yeah, the workup is half the deployment.
That's right. You know? And then we'd go and do a JSET, you know, combined exercise like in, I don't know, Qatar or, you know, any one of the places in the Middle East. And that was 90 days. And that's not accounting combat, you know.
Yeah.
So you're gone at least half of the year.
Are your deployments the standard Army? Standard Army is like a year, right?
Yeah, I think it just kind of, it varied. I think
it changed a lot through those years.
Mine, some of them were as short as 6 months and as long as 9. I never did a year.
Yeah, that's what ours were, 6 months.
Yeah,
on average. Yeah,
I think you had like other units would do like 3, but then you're doing 3 and.
Yeah, right.
It's just a faster churn. It all shakes out to you're gone after the year.
Right. You know, we were talking about how so many people have written books, right? It's like every special forces guy writes a book, not Army, of course. But
right.
I think it's so great that you wrote the book, right? I think we need more perspectives from the wife, right? So, man, we've got enough books out there written by all the soldiers. Start with how you guys met.
We met in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I was there as a civilian working with Department of Defense in the North with their reintegration program, peace and reintegration program. And I was in a province where it was not, the Americans they didn't have a permanent present at the time. It was the Swedes and the Turkish. And so when his A-team came in, they asked, you know, would I brief them on what I knew, you know, who I knew, what I saw, as the American there. And so I walked in to Mazar Sharif on the, Mazar Sharif was this huge base, and in the middle of it was the airfield. On one side was conventional military and NATO, and then on the other side was all ODA, Special Forces. And so I remember we all made the trek to that side, and everyone's like, oh, you know, Special Forces have almost like a demigod type presence. So everyone was a little nervous. So we walked into that plyboard building, and his team comes in. They're all wearing
206s. She had two girls with her.
They're all wearing black T-shirts, big beards, short black scuba shorts. And I was like, who are these men? And sat down, and our eyes connected. We looked at each other, and it was one of those, I think we immediately had sparks. It took a long time before you're in a combat zone, and you have to be very careful as a female to ever when you're in deployment. So after a number of months of talking, and we ended up doing a lot of projects together and sat down many times with Afghan commanders and got to know each other and fell quickly into love.
And that's an awesome story.
Yeah, we say we found love in a broken place, like song Rihanna.
Yeah, hopeless place. Hopeless place. We did, but it was neat. I will never underestimate the value that I got to see him in, warrior mode.
Yeah, that's very unique.
Right.
Very rare.
I have this story. This is my version of this story.
Yeah.
There's one night I was taking my team out to do a night patrol, just a regular on foot. And I think I was the chief warrant officer of the team, right? And we are all, you go, everybody's standing in a circle, you're doing your kit check, go around, touch it. You say it, everybody, say it, touch it. Because sometimes guys will forget stuff. You're like, oh, damn, I forgot my night vision. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
That's why you do those things. Touch or not, radio check. Everyone does it. Alpha, Bravo, go around. And they were all standing out there on the Swedes were watching us jock up, and we got to roll out. It was pretty cool. I got to, I'm like the knight with my getting my stuff on, and she was at the.
She swooned.
Yeah.
That's my version of
a lady in waiting,
Yeah.
just watching you go off to war.
Yeah. No, it was neat. It's very cool to see your husband go, or he became your husband, lead a foot patrol. Or there was one time, I was working late, and the Swedes. It was an Afghan home within an Afghan compound, so it wasn't like a military base. And what I loved about the Swedes is you had to take your shoes off to go in. So, it was comfort.
Right.
So I was had my shoes off. Everyone's getting comfortable, and it's in the evening, and, all of a sudden you hear the Swedish commander's like, the A-team's coming. I mean, all of a sudden the big vehicles roll in, and he comes off, complete kit, head to toe, covered in dust and cake, and, and his beard from having traveled deep into remote areas for days. And that was neat to be able to see.
The Swedes didn't venture out. That wasn't their mission. They were driving up and down the roads, and it was funny. I love this. I had one of those. You've seen the movie 300?
Of course.
Do you remember when Leonidas, when they were going off to the hot gates, and the Athenians, I think, stopped them?
What's your profession?
That was that moment happened with the Swedes. I was sitting at the table, and we were out, when we did our patrols, we were out, and my guys come in, and it was rest and relaxation in the Swedish base. They had a 5-star chef there, from Sweden, beautiful. It was very comfortable. Like she said, you got to take your shoes off. And I'm sitting with the Swedish commander, and I mean, my guys were tired, but they were just on the other table eating. And he was telling me about the Swedish military and how he's like, yeah, our diversity makes us strong. And he's like, for example, Sven over there is an electrician. And it just went around the room, and I promise you, I thought, and I look back at my guys, and I just want to be like,
what is your profession?
We were called the Shark Man, and I'd be like, Shark Man.
We had that similar experience, but we were talking to Army guys.
Yes, you got it in. That was well done.
How did you get into ending up over there?
Oh, it was my background was conflict security and development. I took got my master's degree in the War College in London, through King's College London, and had a passion for the Middle East. So I knew I had been working in D.C. for a nonprofit that had programs in the Middle East, and I'd worked on one in Afghanistan. And I knew at that point I was single. I wanted to get my hands dirty before I, got stuck behind a desk forever. And so I applied, and they picked me up. And so my background is in conflict and conflict resolution and peace and reconciliation. And so it was a perfect fit. I really enjoyed what I did over there, working with the communities, the women, helping to promote peace between both government and the tribes and reintegrate the Taliban at the time, working on those programs. So, we met, and then he came back to the United States, redeployed. I didn't redeploy for a few more months after that. And it was a pretty fast and furious romance. We got married within, a year and a half of meeting.
I went on a deployment by myself. It was in Israel. And I was like, I had talked to her dad and asked if, he was okay if I asked his daughter to be my wife. And she had no idea. And I called her. I said, hey, is there a chance you can come over to Tel Aviv, meet me over here? Because we had talked about, this, I'd never been. And she had been before and told me about, how awesome it was. And she did. She had extra points on her, was it travel points?
I bet.
I did. Yeah, I did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And we went down to Jerusalem, and I was working with the Israelis. And then at night I come back and stayed in a lovely hotel, and we went out walking the Via Dolorosa, the walk of Christ.
Down the Via Dolorosa.
It was really a cool day. And then, we went to Calvary, and it was really emotional. And then I finished strong by proposing to her that night.
Jeez. What a
It was the best. I don't think anyone could top this.
No, good grief.
There were some monks or Catholic priests, with their get up. We were at this rooftop. It was the King David Hotel. I can't remember the name.
It's the Catholic guest house right across from the old gates.
And you're looking at the golden dome. It's just beautiful, right? And the sunset, and these guys. There's a group of them, and they were doing shots. It looked
monks. Full on brown,
Yeah.
get
but
up.
they saw me get on my knees, and they came over and they blessed our marriage.
Wow.
So that was really cool too.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Now, were both of you Christians at the time, or
Just
tell me
going
about
off that, yeah.
where you guys were at with your faith?
Yeah.
I grew up in the faith. I grew up with in a very conservative, Jesus loving, Bible believing family. So I had the faith seed for, since childhood. Of course, as you grow up, you deal with, rebellion and trying to find your own way. And I had in 2007, when I was studying Arabic in Jordan, I had met this couple, Jamie and Donna Winship. I don't know if who were there, and they brought me into their lives during that time and really showed me a God that I didn't know. And I remember thinking, these are the coolest people I've ever met, and they're Christians.
You gotta look up. His sermons are great.
Right. And so they opened my eyes to a God that is real, and a God that is powerful, and a God that loves, and a God that heals, and a God that still does the same miracles that he did in Acts and in the Old Testament. And that was where I think my faith that is now, that's the root of where it started. But at the time, it still was very much head. And I think what we went through, that's detailed in the book, all of it truly became like heart, where you're forced to contend with what you know in your head and live it.
What about you, Nelson?
I did not grow up in the church. My parents never. They talked about it. I'm from Southwest Virginia, like Appalachia.
Yeah.
Little town called Gate City, Scott County. My papa was a farmer. he had an outhouse until I was like 10 or so. And, but just the salt of the earth people, you know what I mean? And so they, you know, they listen to old timey bluegrass and,
Yep.
you know, the old, those old Christian hymns and stuff like that. My granny was always in the kitchen cooking. And so it was there, right? But it was never a, go to church or anything like that. But they believed. I mean, they had that old classic picture of Jesus on the wall. But yeah, my dad was in the Army. And it was just, no. And as I grew, I got married. I had a first marriage, and I thought it was the right thing to do. Like, your dad down, married, you got to go to church. So we go to church on Sunday, Baptist church. Mm-hmm. And so I did that in my military career. And on my deployments, I remember we always had a chaplain at battalion.
Yeah.
And like my heart, I was seeking, because every deployment, I always befriended the chaplain. One of them was Major Smith at the time. He called me cousin. I'll never forget him. Kind of looked like Dr. Phil. And so it was, I did my own, my own Bible study, just seeking. And so it's grown. And then when we were going through, when I was retiring, it's when we started going to an Anglican church. And that to me was like, I would say life-changing. But that church, the men that were there, the pastor, Father Thomas, was one of my best friends. And that really just solidified it to me, right? That's when I started feeling like I say the Holy Spirit, but it was like, I mean, this is real. Like I always wanted it.
Yeah.
You see those men up there and they just look like they're glowing with it.
Yeah.
You're like, how do you get that?
That's so interesting. I want to talk about that. So, So many people, I think our perception of an Anglican church, by the way, we've got a Men's Alliance tribe at an Anglican church in Pennsylvania. I think a lot of people perceive of an Anglican church as very formal, liturgical, rigid. So it's interesting that that's where you felt the Holy Spirit. Because I think the stereotype is cold, the frozen chosen, right? Well, the Holy Spirit is at the loud, jumping around dancing church. Tell us about your experience being in an Anglican church with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah. Father Thomas was just a unique individual. He's from Texas. He always said, I'm the pastor of this here church. He wrote the book The Anglican Way, and it means via media. It means the middle way, and so it has to me the best of all the things. And what's really important to me was like you practice everything. Like when you takes 1,000 times to create a habit. We practice shooting. We practice fighting, whatever it is. You work out, basketball. To me, the liturgical part of that church is the same, right? It's like that repetitive. Mm-hmm. We say the Nicene Creed. You say the Lord's Prayer. This is how it is. And then you got about 20 minutes in there where the pastor says some things, and then you take communion, which is, to me, the most holy sacrament. And I internalize that. And so the more that I practice it, the better I became at it. And I'm still practicing.
Yeah. I like that.
But
I think that's a perspective that more people need to hear.
Yeah. It's not uptight either. I mean,
Right.
I don't think maybe I'm uptight, right. But I mean, my pastor and I, we'd go have a beer,
Yeah.
Which you can't do in the Baptist.
No. I grew up in a Southern Baptist church.
Yeah, I grew up in not Southern Baptist. I grew up in the Stiff Baptist.
Grew up non-denominational.
Yeah.
But I started doing the Episcopal church in college, and then shifted to the Anglican, and pretty much done it the whole time. Been in the denomination. But I will say, I think what the Anglican Church has done for us is that when we were going through this dark time, it allowed for parameters and for structure. You weren't just one of 1,000 people in a church and just kind of lost in the muddle and the muck. But Father Thomas was very deliberate at encouraging spiritual disciplines. And then he created small groups we didn't choose the small groups. He just kind of placed us in small groups. And that small group almost became like our spiritual A team, right? That surrounded us. And then we had to make a commitment every Tuesday that we would go to our small group, which was really hard for us to do because we really are very spontaneous and fly by the seat of our pants. And
Chips and
we
margaritas? Okay.
yeah, right,
Hey,
right,
I'm down.
exactly.
Let's go. Thanks for coming, guys. Chips and margaritas.
Let's go.
Just bring it in. But we deliberated a long time. Like, can we do this? Should we do this? 'Cause he wanted us to basically make a vow, a commitment. And we did. But I'll tell you that the weekly we opened, small group was always open with evening song, which includes confession, the prayer of confession. And to every week be saying and acknowledging to people around you, like, we need help. Like,
Multi-generational too.
right.
70-year-old to in our small
I love
group
that.
to 20, and we were in our 30s.
Right.
There were days I didn't want to go in because I was just like, I would sit in the car and like, you know, we were arguing and I was this hyper vigilance, and then you're embarrassed because you know that they know that you're being a little, you know, crybaby in the car, you know, and then it just makes you want to run away even harder.
Right.
And then, you know, one of the guys came out, the older gentleman comes out and he's like, come inside. We really, really want you to come inside.
And that's the tribal. I mean,
that's right.
It allowed us to have a place to be real. And I truly think they loved us into healing. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have that small group who overlooked and saw to the heart of who we are and the heart of who, especially, you know.
Father Thomas is always of the type where he's like, you know, because I had these questions. I'm like, why, you know, what is it? How do you feel the Holy Spirit? And he's just like, I don't know. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And it's like, there was no like you think you're going to get this like binary answer.
He's a real dude.
Real guy, right? It's like, what do you want to...
Gave you a real answer.
Right. How do you feel about this? I don't know. Let's do it. If you want to do it, do it. Like, it was just that whole thing. It was like the Lord put us there at that time. Right?
Right. So I love that, like Father Thomas and the older men, the men in our small group, and ultimately also the counselor, they saw the real us and not the mess, not the brokenness.
Thomas, he was the first one to say PTSD. She called for she texted him like, I need an emergency meeting. I was, you know, not very happy, not in a good space. And you know, when you want someone to, I don't know, when you leave, when I left that tribe and you're all alone and you don't know what to do, and I was latching on to her and just wanted someone to love me, and then you're pushing her away at the same time.
Oh man.
So she texted Thomas, I need an emergency session, you know, can we come in? And he said, yeah. Went into his office, we sat down, just talked to a few things. And then he, you know, I said something like, are you sleep? He said, are you sleeping okay? I was like, well, I mean, yeah. Except I jump up, you know, like if you ever lay in the bed and you think you closed the door and you're laying there and it looks like it might be open in a little bit. And I would jump out, like grab my gun, because I always keep it really close, and jump out of bed and go check the door. And I'm like, oh, I'm up. Let me go check all the other doors. Scare the piss out of her. And
how are you sleeping?
Apparently that's
really good, normal. Except for just jumping up and clearing the house.
Clear the house.
I thought it was normal. Like, I mean, I knew a lot of guys that did that. And he's like, no, that's not normal. He's like, it sounds like He's like, I'm not a counselor, therapist, but it sounds like PTSD. And I was like, that's weak.
Man, are you looking to obtain or upgrade your insurance? Well, let me tell you about Robert Kelly, call sign Risk. He is with On Track Insurance Solutions, and he can help you with home, auto, health, or even workers' comp insurance. You can contact Risk at 804-931-6646.
We stack bodies, you know.
Yeah, that's what other people get.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
I want to pause for a second for our listeners. So everything sounded great. You met in Afghanistan. You got engaged in Israel. So everything's roses, right? But we're going to get into the tough spot. And their book is Recalibrated. Not really their book, her book. But you do have a little bit you wrote in the beginning, kind of like a foreword about, which is kind of you saying, hey, this is her story, but it's also ours. And I'm not the same guy that this book is written about. But Recalibrated, and I want to read you guys the subtitle. It's How a Green Beret and His Bride Overcame Realities of Combat and Broken Relationship Through Faith, Hope, and Love. Your background that you mentioned earlier in conflict, reconciliation, it's a little bit of foreshadowing, right?
It is.
So let's pick up with where things start to unravel.
I wrote in my journal, which I actually quoted in the book, the prayer that I felt that I wrote soon after we got engaged or married. Oh, here it is. Most importantly, Lord, I pray that we will be a shining example to those around us on how to love, reconcile, and live according to your will.
Yeah.
I mean, that, if you want to talk about foreshadowing, it was one of those, be careful what you pray for.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how it's going to get answered.
Yeah.
But that, I mean, that is the irony, is I think my core being leans into conflict with the hope of reconciliation. And here I was, someone who'd gone to school and how to manage conflict, and I couldn't even manage the conflict in our own marriage. It was building and mounting quickly. And I don't know if you want to tell, I'll let Nelson tell his side of the story and kind of what he was experiencing at the time. But ultimately, it's about all your walls coming down. Everything you thought, who you thought you were, your foundation, and then allowing yourself to go through that in order to be rebuilt. And you get the choice. Are you going to rebuild in your old self? Or are you going to rebuild, or allow the Lord to rebuild you? And it's incredibly painful. But what He is going to build is going to be far more beautiful, lasting. And so for me, it was realizing that, I mean, I could have had this shiny veneer of a being, but behind it was, pride and arrogance and needing that performance and, perfectionism and everything that builds so that you finally, if you can't control everything, you fall apart. And that's where I ended up when I realized these waves of conflict I cannot manage. And I tried. I did a lot of striving in my own strength to do everything and to manage this situation. But you have to find yourself at rock bottom and letting go before God is finally there. Jesus is there to say, I'm the only one who can change somebody. You can't do it. So, do you want to talk about how the episode started, or you?
Yeah, I think I did a little bit ago, but it's like one of those. I don't know. Everything swirls together, right? And you can go all the way back, and I have the luxury of looking backwards now. But those images or those events, which I guess most people would say very traumatic events, you can't, there's no time to process those. You got to keep going, especially early on in the global war. And then you can't show weakness. You want to be on the team. It's like this culture is like, you want to be there. You'll do whatever it takes to be part of that, right? Marines are really good at that. Military is really good at it, to making you feel like you're just the most important part of that team, right? And so I would say you take that trauma, right, and you you stuff it away, and then you become hardened and you keep going. Doesn't mean it's not there,
right.
and or it's being added to, but you just manage it, right? And because the operational tempo was so fast, you don't even have time. At the end, we were going through marriage counseling before all this stuff, and the marriage counselor was like,
It was the pre-marriage, right? The pre-marriage counseling.
He was like, you have a lot. I started to talk about some of it. He's like, how long do you have till you retire? I said, I don't know, 3-4 years. He's like, you don't want to talk about it now. You know what I mean? Like, it was, if I still had to perform. He didn't want to
open that can of worms yet.
Right. Yeah. And I'm like, I didn't even really understand at the time. Right. And so you just carry on. And then, you know, that the counseling and therapy is the brotherhood, you know, like this. You show up and you put work in. And then when that goes away and you're alone, I liken it to, the analogy I use is I was driving this bullet train, and I'm really good at it, like sophisticated train. I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not. I'm shoveling coal and flipping all the switches, just flying. And you know, to go through that many deployments, it's just boom, boom, boom. It's a normal thing. One day you're driving in friggin' Baghdad, the next day I'm in Nashville. People cutting me off, and and then you leave that, and so driving on this train, and then somebody taps you on the back and says, "Hey, you can go now." And you jump off the train, and it's dark, and you're rolling, and it keeps going. You stand up, dusting yourself off, and you can hear the track, and it's getting quieter. You know, like the train's getting further and further away, and you're just standing there like, where the hell am I?
Everything you know just kind of leaves you in the dust.
The sights, sounds, smells, everything's just like weird. And then I had gone through a divorce, you know, and my ex and her, the kids had moved away. And so you just felt alone, isolation. And I wanted her to be with me and make me feel better all the time.
Yeah.
But I didn't consciously know that, right? It was just like, you know, well, if you loved me, you would do this or that, right? And so it just became this toxic outlet where I just needed really just somebody to say, you're okay. And I didn't get that. And then it just spiraled.
It's when everything you know is taken away, like, or too many news, right? It was a new marriage for us, the new deployment. His kids had moved to another state. When everything is stripped.
Yeah, the human mind can only take so much new.
Right, exactly. And then what it does, it's that well of everything that had been in your deep in your body and your soul and your spirit just kind of started to bubble forward. And you know, they do say that A teams, Green Berets statistically generally don't get PTSD while they're on a team. They don't present in the same way statistically as conventional Army. And some of that is the thought is because A teams operate, like he said, as a brotherhood, right? That they banter in the team room, and it's almost a surface Band-Aid. But then when you get off the team, or when things really start to transition, like you got off, then the worlds start to crumble. But the stigma against getting help, especially as a Green Beret, I mean, we were at a retirement party for someone, and I was talking to one of the military Green Berets, and he said, "Oh, Green Berets don't get PTSD," as we're living it, as Nelson and I are literally trying to overcome and just make it through a day. And I'm thinking, this is not right. Like, how many other wives are like me, standing here with a smile on my face and realizing their husband is really suffering?
Yeah.
Father Thomas, he was when we had that meeting, he said, "Listen, I know somebody who you would get along with, you know," and he's a therapist. maybe can help you. Church will pay for it. Because, at the time, you don't want to, you get help in the military. Like,
You don't go to the unit's counselor.
but they're there.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, get help. Okay.
Yeah.
You go get help, you're going to be, boom, you're off the team.
Because you know everybody's talks, or you feel like they are.
Well, they know that you went there.
And then, right, that's what I mean.
And then you're done.
Right.
And as much as people talk about like, breaking the stigma, I mean, to some degree, I don't know. It's an interesting balancing act. But so the church sent me over to a gentleman who was doing what's called EMDR, the eye movement, desensitization, whatever.
Desensitization and reprogramming.
That's right.
Yeah.
Basically rewiring your brain from the trauma that you've seen, so there you don't experience it the same way. And I mean, I think probably like all of us is like, I recognized that I was not being a good person. I was staying up, drinking like it was my job. Staying up and watching war movies and, dip in Copenhagen and drinking till 2 or 3. And then I'd wake up and she'd go off and be a teacher and do it again. And, it's not right. I feel terrible and, all this stuff. And so, at any rate, I go and I start going. It was south of Nashville. I start going and to do the EMDR, and I wanted it. Like, you have to want it. No matter what therapy you get, you really have to. And I wanted it so badly because I wanted my marriage to be healthy. And I didn't want to feel that way. At any rate, I was doing it. One day I was leaving, and sometimes she would come with me. I don't know if you were there with me for that one, but I was leaving. And, it's a bunch of offices, and they have the sound machines and stuff. And then there's the main door. And I was I was approaching the exit, and then the door swings open, and a guy puts his head in and has an envelope, and he's putting it in the payment box. And he turns around and sees me, and I was on the scuba team. This guy was on the Halo team right across the hallway. And he looks at me, and we look at him like, he's like, what are you doing here? And I was like, talking. It's like, what are you doing here? He said, paying for talking. It's like it was a secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah, it helped. It got
Tell
worse.
a little bit about what EMDR was like.
Well, really, it wasn't until we went to Soldier Center with Dr. Hurley.
Yeah. So what happened with that one? Was that the guy? He was cool. He was a baseball player. I could see why Thomas thought we'd get along because we broed it up, but it was too much because the therapist, you gotta.
Yeah.
There's some vibe, as my daughter said, vibes that you gotta have.
Yeah.
And he, it was good, but it was too close.
Yeah.
Right.
So we found someone, Dr. Elijah Hurley, who was like a master trainer in EMDR. He was a retired Army chaplain, colonel. And so we had so many of that. And he was a minister. I mean,
And from Appalachia.
And from Appalachia. I mean, it was like, when God speaks through other people, I mean, you can't, it's always when you look back, you see the fingerprint.
Right.
I mean, you can't make that up. And we would pray before we get started, clear your heart, your spirit, what are you coming in with? And then we get into EMDR, and it's, you'll close your eyes and they have you visualize like your safe space. It always starts with like identifying your safe space. So if you have some episode that causes you anxiety, you can try to go back to that safe space. And it's, there's this light that goes back and forth, and there are these paddles you hold in your hand, and it's not shocking, just bzz, 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 and it just is trying to take your brain off of whatever it is at the moment. And I'm not a counselor, but it's like, how do you feel about this? Think about this thing, and then how does it make you feel? And then you're watching the lights, and then it'll stop it. And okay, is that feeling still there? Has it moved? And I know it sounds weird, but you keep doing that. And those moments where you're, like, well, this is weird. This isn't going to work. But slowly I really started to like try to focus on that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start think, okay, it did move. And there was one night I went home, we reprocessed, where you talk about this event. It was one that I put in the book, very tragic. You know, you look around, it was where I'm looking at human beings shredded to pieces. I mean, not just one or two, like 50 plus. And you're picking up body parts everywhere. And I'll never forget the question he asked me was, how did you feel in that moment when I was looking at my teammate? And it's funny now that I know these things, is that it's the lies of the enemy. That's really fundamentally what it was. It was like, I felt weak. That I couldn't pick him up, that I dropped him because I was tired. You know, like, I felt weak. I felt worthless. It's the lies about that put in your brain about yourself. And when you say those things out loud, it's like, oh. And then you start processing that. And I remember going home that night, and I don't think she was doing something. And I had a real panic attack. Like, my heart rate was up. I ended up calling him, and he's like, go to your safe space. And so I went through that exercise, and because they always say when you start hitting some of those, those nerves, that it might get worse. And I was like, wow, this is for real, because it did. And I didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
So
stuff's real.
I know.
Right? And, guys hearing your story right now, you're giving people a lot of permission, to be real about it, to get help for it. So many people are, pretending, kidding themselves that they can white knuckle it.
That's what I said at the book launch event. I was like, guys, don't be knuckleheads.
Yeah.
Like, do it for yourself. You're feeling that way. It's not right. And there's no other, you can do the easy thing all day long. And it's going to be hard. But damn it, it's worth it,
Yeah.
It really is.
I think that's awesome to hear you say is it's worth it. Right? Because nobody wants to go through it. Right? Nobody wants to get out of their car and go into that office and follow the lights with their eyes. Right? But the stuff really works. I mean, EMDR has an incredible track record with lots of different things, not just severe PTSD. It's helped people with addictions, and so, I just think guys need to hear a Green Beret say, I went and did this and it helped, right? That's huge. Would you share a little bit about the story from the book with the flight surgeon?
Oh, that was, you want to talk? I mean, there's so the God is good, man. Like, you speaking through people. We were on a vacation. It was in North Carolina.
It was our first year anniversary.
In Wilmington.
Yeah.
We're on the beach.
Not doing well. Doing well,
Right.
relationally.
Right.
And we're on the beach, and you know how guys wear stuff to signal things like hats, right? This guy was wearing, which, by the way, I always say special operations guys like to be conspicuously inconspicuous.
Right.
Right. Yeah. They wear the pants, or back in the day it was the Sunto watches, or long hair.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you do? Oh,
Yeah.
We're not making nuclear material, man. But I look up and I see this guy walking, and he had the Special Forces hat, crossed arrows on it, on the hat, and he's walking his dog. And so I was like, oh, we go up and say, hey, because it's not often. And he looked like he was older. And I said, hey, which unit were you with? And he said, I think it was 10th at the time. And we started talking. I told him I was in 5th. You know how you go. And then you start playing the name game. Bob?
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, I don't know Bob. but I don't know how the conversation got to it, but it got to the 2001. He said he was a flight surgeon. And I was like, oh, and he was in Afghanistan in 2001. I told him I was in Afghanistan in 2001. Yeah. He said, where? And he's like, I was on a helicopter that landed. In 2001, our team got hit. We had been in a just locked battle with the Taliban for a couple of days. And it was December 5th, 2001. It was quiet. It was wild. It was quiet that day. There was caves, and I remember I was at the top of this hill. We had pulled back to this mountaintop or hilltop, and we dug in. And there was at one point earlier that we were almost surrounded by them, and we were calling in the AC-130 gunship, like blazing. And you could feel the heat. You know, it was kind of cold at night, but you can feel the heat from the explosions. Anyway, the next day, unbeknownst to us, there was a JDAM that was falling because one of the they were handing equipment to us on the ramp of the airplane when we were going in. Everything was new, right? The radio, embedder radio at the time, they were brand new out of a box. I had to read on the airplane, reading the instructions on how to use this thing, and then I taught my guys how to use it. This is as we're before we intro. Yeah. They handed me a satellite phone. I was like, okay, reading the instructions on how to use this damn thing. So all that to say is the guys that were with us, it was Air Force guys that they just received this thing called a Viper. Viper is a laser rangefinder, and it connects to a GPS, military GPS device. And then I think it was new. And you push a button, the laser goes out, hits whatever the object is, comes back, and it tells you what the grid is to where that is, right? And I guess the battery died or something like that in the GPS. Again, I don't know. There are lots of reports about it. But they replaced the battery, and then they, lazed the cave again. And I went down the hill to go get something out of a truck, which was less than 20 yards away from the top. And they gave the grid to a B-1 bomber, or B-52, I don't remember, whatever it was. And he asked, confirm the grid. He confirmed the grid. And it was our grid. It was literally our grid. So I can tell you the bombs are accurate because it landed right there where they were standing. Mm-hmm. And it was a 2,000-pound munition, so it's like the size of a car, that air burst. Mm-hmm. And when it burst above the ground, it goes out. And so, when I said people were shredded, it was like everywhere, parts and pieces. And you can't, your mind, when you talk about your mind, like you can't, it's hard to reconcile. You're like, is that that's half of a head, and you got to pick off. Police call took a different meaning, right?
Right. These are your own guys.
Yeah. Well, our guys, Afghans, we were all together, Did you
say a mile away? People had?
No, like 100 yards or so where, decapitated somebody. Afghans. They lost a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I bet the Taliban thought we were crazy. They're like, man, they bombed themselves. Those guys are wild.
Right.
Man, I'm sorry, I forgot the question to begin with.
The flight surgeon.
Oh yeah. So, right. So we had to clean up, right? And we had, everybody was wounded. I had, my back was just soaked with blood because the way I was standing against the truck. It was like 1 second, it was dark. I felt like a Looney Tunes thing, if you look back where the explosion. I just remember, I didn't even hear the explosion. It was sunny. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I remember I just was lying down on the ground. It didn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And then everything was dark. And I stood up, and you kind of start dusting yourself off. Like, why was I laying down?
Yeah.
And you just look around, and it's cloudy because all the dust and everything. Mm-hmm. And then I just saw my buddy, one of my guys was coming through the smoke, and his face was just streaked with blood. And he was like, incoming, because we'd been locked with, I mean, the Al-Qaeda guys were on the radio. You know, we knew it was, Kandahar was there. This was the last holdout, right?
The Taliban guys.
No, Al-Qaeda. We were listening to them on the radio. They were with them on the other side of the bridge. And because I spoke Arabic, and I was trying to translate at the time. My Arabic was weak. It's better now. So yeah, you clean up, you're trying to pick this stuff up. They sent in reinforcements, medevac to all the guys. Well, that medevac that came in, we were handing off, you know, the body bags, the walking wounded that were really badly wounded. And it turned out that he was the flight surgeon there, and he was the one performing, trying to save some of the guys' lives while they were getting them out of there. Met the guy on the beach, and he said, he's like, what did he say? He's like,
my number one advice is get help before you get out.
Yeah.
When you still have this team structure. I guess he had gotten out and his world fell apart, and PTSD and his family, he was describing how his family went through a very difficult time.
And I did not hear him in that time. I just didn't. You know, you look now, it's like, oh, geez, I'm a bonehead. Mm-hmm. I didn't hear him. Didn't want to hear him.
But it still made an impression.
It does now. You look backwards. But, I mean, she was like, oh, hey, listen to this guy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it took a year, but that's what the Lord does, right? He has to strip everything away. Like, unless you're an empty vessel for him to fill. Like, any vestige of our old self that's going to get in the way of him rebuilding us into our true identities, we have to willingly be ready to let it go, be burned off.
At the end of my career, around the same time when we were going through this stuff too, I left my team when I was still active to go do some other mission, because I did become fluent in Arabic, and I went to work with a different mission. And I left the team, and my team deployed to Afghanistan again. So we'd gone to Afghanistan around 2011. So this would have been 2012 or 13. And I didn't deploy with them because I was doing something else. And they were doing clearing a valley in southeast Paktika, somewhere in Afghanistan. You know, you're sweeping through a valley, and they took contact or something, and ended up, same thing happened. And it wasn't a JDAM, but it was a bomb hit our guys and killed 2 of my, team guys. They were young guys, and 3 of the infantry guys that were with them. And so then here I am, back at Arlington. It's one of those, like, and you just, man, this is a lot. Watching their kids, like, when is this stuff gonna end? It was heavy.
Oh.
But we didn't learn anything, 10 years ago. Same damn thing happened. It's the worst.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us a little bit about the role of forgiveness in your story. It's a big part of the book.
Yeah.
Forgiving and needing forgiveness.
Right.
Talk to us about that.
And forgiving self.
Yeah.
As well. So, my side of this story is realizing when he would be going through what we started to term episodes. And then I would try to manage the episodes, and I would try to strive to, like, whatever needed to happen to keep peace. And then that wasn't working. And then by the time I was worn down, I would respond in just as ugly of a way to him, yelling and screaming, and just kind of the fights the worst fights. And so, what I realized was, like, here I am, justified in the world's, view. I mean, I'm, quote, the victim, right? And yet what I realized is when I hit my rock bottom and the Lord said, let me worry about Nelson, but let me pull you out of the pit. And what he started to do is show me very gently where I needed to change. What, my walls were down, and what did I need to repent and confess and to bring his life? Because, repentance is the goodness of God to bring us back into right relationship with him and with ourselves. And just realizing through the process of him changing me, changing my heart, showing me how I was misaligned in my view of him. And then he started to shift and show me how to pray differently for my husband, how to pray for our family. And through that, I realized I had to forgive myself for the way I treated Nelson. And I had to, and I had to ask him for forgiveness, because forgiveness is what releases you to live freely. If you don't forgive, I think I say it's like dragging a corpse around. It will rot you to the bones. And so, it's a process. None of this happens quickly. Truly, it's one of those that even, the enemy today can still try to touch, soft spots.
Sure.
And then you have to actively remind yourself to forgive, that you have forgiven. And it's one of those where that's where you renew your mind, right? Every day, renew your mind. Take captive every thought, because nothing's a one and done, or rarely is it one and done. And so I think forgiveness is it's a habit of the heart. It's a lifestyle. It's not a feeling. You don't feel forgiveness. And I remember asking the Lord, I was like, Lord, what does forgiveness feel like? Have I forgiven? He said, it's not a feeling. It's a way of life. It's a choice to let go, and not to hold on. Because if you clasp and grasp on to feelings of right, like I'm right in how I feel, that's going to lead to bitterness. It's going to lead to vengeance. It's going to lead to I'm right, you're wrong, which is pride. And forgiveness just lays that all down. And it's just choosing to say, you don't owe me anything. We have four little children, and one will hurt the other. And you're saying, well, can you forgive them? Well, they didn't ask me to forgive them. And I said, well, the Lord's Prayer says, help us to forgive as Christ forgave, not help us to forgive because we've been asked to forgive. And I think that's where it starts. It starts in our heart. And reconciliation starts in the heart. Forgiveness starts in our heart. And it's a posture. And so getting to that point can be hard, but I think, like Nelson said, you said something earlier about just doing. And if you do something, maybe something will happen. Some of it is just going through and saying, I'm going to forgive. Or Lord,
just knock.
Help me to want to forgive, or help me to forgive even though I don't feel like forgiving. And it's that choice to act, and then I think things will happen.
I like to say it's like, you get the fire. The analogy is I was forged, or we are forged. And when you forge something, you forge a blade. You're bang and shape, get it down, fine tune. Doesn't stay sharp. And to your point about the church, community, what you have here is really cool because you're sharpening, it says iron sharpening iron.
Yeah.
I think it's even better than that, but you're constantly having to hone that blade. And that's why communion with the brotherhood is so cool.
Let me ask you guys this. How important is it in this process that y'all have gone through? How important is it for a couple that's listening to this, that's going through some similar traumas? How important is it to ask people for help versus
very important
versus pretend or try to do it on your own?
Yeah, you can't do it on your own. Healing comes through community. It comes through confess to one another and you will be healed. But you have to be very careful. You have to be discerning on who you
got to find safe people.
Right. You don't go looking for confirmation of how you feel. You have to be willing to have someone say to you, or 1 o'clock in the morning, episodes going on, and I would call a friend, and she would say, "But Anne, how are you responding?" Not, "Hey, come in and sympathize with me because my husband's been doing this and this," and no, it goes back to, how are you responding? What you have to be willing to take the hard questions from the person, knowing it's coming from a place of love, because we all want to get to where we are, who God created us to be, right? And that is all rooted in love. And so,
no trauma bonding.
Right, no trauma bonding. You have to be able to take.
A lot of people love that.
Right, take the hard and the good from the people, but be discerning in who you share with, because you want someone who's going to speak life into you.
That's so important. How can somebody tell? How can somebody tell if they're talking to the right person?
Trust is a really funny thing, because we as humans, we want to give it and take it. Trust is, but it's so hard, it escapes us. Especially for guys, the big, like, you can't get there. But I think it takes time, as Ann said, discerning to get to that point where you can be vulnerable with somebody, because I think more often than not, it will be that surface level trauma bonding kind of thing, validating, echo chamber kind of situation. It just takes time, and you've got to establish trust. And trust is, there's a lot that trust means.
I mean, and I think the fruit of it will speak for itself.
Yeah.
It's so hard to do.
Are they tearing,
It really is.
It is.
You put in there in the book, it's like sharing your dirty laundry, but one step further is having people come in and help you fold it.
Yeah.
Especially when your house is a mess, the kids are running around. And I don't know, there's no like blueprint that we can say you can do this. It just takes time and trusting. And really, it was that small group that was there that we were in.
Well, it's the people who
you're trying
will open, who they are open to be a conduit for the Holy Spirit. And so, I mean, the person themselves will be the friend, but are they bringing you back to Christ? Like, are they constantly leading you to what are the promises of Scripture? What is the faithfulness of the God we serve? So if they're leading you in other directions, I would say that to me would be a red flag. Like, I'm looking for people who are going to say, go to the well and drink deeply. Go to the Psalms. Go to where is the Lord present in that relationship?
I've had guys ask me or say, during this time, and I could tell you that it made me not want to hang out with them. Where they were like calling people out. There's a difference, right? Say, well, I'm worried about your drinking. I'm like, mind your own business. You know what I mean? And then you shut down. So there's a way. When I say trust, you've got to build a relationship with them. Like,
you've got to kind of earn the right
to say that. Right, especially if you haven't walked in my shoes.
Yeah.
Right. Thomas, he never did that. But he didn't slack up on me. It was more of a roundabout way of doing it. Yeah.
And I also, from the female perspective, you can't be husband bashing. Like, people are going to come to you and then only tell you the bad things about their husband.
Oh, yeah.
That's not. The key is they're coming to you or you're going to someone. It's got to be for help in the relationship, and there are two people in the relationship, which means, and Christ very clearly says, take the log out of your own eye. So you want to have someone who's going to help you see that log and not just look, I think the number one thing is stop talking badly about your husband or relaying everything that they've done, because people don't need to hear every detail of the night before.
Yeah.
Because when you make it out, you're still there, but you will make it out.
I think that's such a natural reaction, though, talking about not your own, mind your own business.
Yeah.
That's what we want to, it's like nobody wants to be told they're doing something that they shouldn't.
Right.
Or so it's just such a natural, like, mind your own business. But if it's someone in your tribe who I guess you love and respect, it's like, yeah. You know, but it's also hard to be like, is this a moment where I should not mind my own business, you know? So
Yeah.
when you got away, you know?
That's where that trust, you know, that real relationship comes in, because then you can accept it. But if it's somebody on the periphery or something like that, or you're, like I said, that it doesn't resonate.
Yep.
And you were saying earlier how you would have been justified, right? There's a whole group of, probably even a majority of counselors in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Did you have any saying that to you?
Oh, yeah. The
Saying,
first one we went
just
to.
leave.
Basically, yeah. Oh, the first, I wrote about it in the book, the first counselor, you know, we were military, you know, I was a teacher. We couldn't afford to pay for out of pocket. So you find whoever it was through TRICARE. And what I went in, I was so distinct. And I told her what was going on. I mean, she just looked like her jaw dropped, and she just looked at me and she was like, "Why are you with him?" Like,
There were a lot of people that said that.
I mean, yeah, I'd say the majority of them did. That's the other. I knew very deeply in my heart, as much as I wanted to run away, it was not right. Like, there was something very deep that said, stay, stick through. Like, I'm working on him. And so, you know, I think that was a gift of the Lord at the time. So it was like a tuning fork. Because if I didn't have that and everyone kept saying, run away, we might not be here today. But to be able to realize, like, no, like, this is the man that I know is there. The one that God created, not the one war created. And so that also led to the being very discerning, not even discerning, just timid to open up our story. And I think it wasn't until Father Thomas put us in that community, our small group that became the tribe, that we built the trust, that every week we were saying confession together. We were reading the Psalms together. We did spiritual discipline together. Then they started to speak into, then we started to open up. Then it was like the Holy Spirit started to really move. But counselors, what most people said, cut and run.
I've talked about that on other podcasts. I've been through that kind of marriage counseling too, where they just said, why are you still married?
Wow.
And you're like, okay, this is our last appointment. And I think that's a big fork in the road of how we can tell not just counselors, but friends, support, right? If you're with people that are trying to help you improve your relationships, or are you confiding in, spending time with people who are trying to get you to end relationships? Right? And if you're with that group, you're probably with the wrong group. Right. So.
Right. Well, and because the truth is, we are all going to go through hard times. Every one of us has a difficult relationship at some point in our life, whether it's marriage or family or friends. How we choose to operate and to walk across that threshold says more about ourselves than the other. And so in a marriage, it can be horrible and messy, but if you walk through and cut and run, you're going to bring all your messiness into the next one. Unless you've gone through the whole process, the refining process of the Lord showing you your own logs and bringing you down and letting him build you up. And then if whatever he says to do in the relationship you do, I'm not advocating someone stay in an abusive relationship.
Right.
But the key is truly getting out. You can only work on yourself. And if your self is right, if your self is aligned, if we have been on our knees and we have a humble heart and we are crying out to the Lord, create in me a clean heart, right? Renew a steadfast spirit. Then we can walk through that door clean, no matter what happens on the other side of that door. I think most people cut and run, and then they're just going to bring everything of their mess into the next relationship.
I was just laughing because it's like, because I know this happens because I've done it, and I'm assuming lots of people do. It's like, I mean, I'm praying for him.
Right.
God, the Lord's gonna change him. Like God's gonna come down and hit him on the head with a.
Well, that was me. I was like,
know.
I'm praying. I kept
It was
praying.
part- it was part-
Oh, Lord, why aren't you changing Nelson? You know what? It's like, let me change you first.
That
Dan.
takes a lot of courage to focus on your slice of the pie, right? Even if your slice might be 1% of the pie, and maybe he's responsible for 99% of the problems, for you to focus on, well, what's my 1%? What am I contributing that I could focus on? Man, that takes a lot of courage.
Right.
I was just going to ask you, what advice would you say to a wife of a police officer or a firefighter or a soldier who is dealing with PTSD? What would you say to that wife who's at the beginning of this journey?
Don't give up on them yet. Don't give up on them. Find this. I mean, the God that we serve, the God that I serve, that Nelson and I serve, is a faithful God. Every promise that he has given to us, you can claim, you can stand on. And a lot of those promises come with conditions, right? If you follow my ways, if you humble yourself. And so follow, like go into scripture, find the words that are resonating. And that was, to me, life-giving at the time. It was also hard because a lot of the scriptures were like, oof, I fall short of that. Okay, Lord, like help me. But his promises are real. And reconciliation starts in the heart. It doesn't start in the other person's heart. It starts in your heart. And so just taking one day at a time, sometimes it's 2 steps back and half a step forward. But you can't judge by time. Just move forward. You're going to mess up. We went darker before we got lighter. Even after I'd hit rock bottom, I was trying to implement all this. But we serve a gracious God who's slow to anger and just truly abundant in love. So seek help.
Yeah.
Seek the promises, and reconciliation starts in our heart.
That's so powerful. Nelson, I'm going to end with you. I've got a question that one of our listeners submitted who's read your book and wants me to ask you. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Your first kiss in Afghanistan. Tell us your memory of it.
It's definitely nervous. Like you're like, I'm a grown man, but why am I nervous? Like
I'm a warrior, dang it.
yeah, right. It's it was one of those like we talk, you know, the where you just spend that time, you just talk, you just want to talk nonstop. We talked about everything, and we were saying, you know, bidding our adieus and parting ways. I was going to go to my room, and she was going across to her room, and we were just talking, and you know, just accidentally moving closer, and we kissed. Yeah.
And
It was
fireworks.
Oh my gosh, it still is.
How long have you guys been together? How long ago was this first kiss? What are we talking about here? 4 kids ago, right?
It was probably 12, 13.
13 years ago.
11. It would have been like November of 2011 ish.
Something like that.
Can you guys reenact that moment?
It was wonderful.
Man, that's a
Again,
good one.
probably one for the Hollywood movies.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't wait for the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, all my guys were
made.
singing in the background.
Yeah.
Where's this
No,
picture?
but there were
where's this
Swedish
picture
soldiers going up and down. The picture is actually Jordan
taken? Oh, cool.
Okay.
Wadi Rum.
in the Wadi Rum.
Sweet.
Yeah.
This was great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your story. Recalibrated. Check it out. It's we'll link it in the show notes. And you guys are local too.
We are.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
So
Here's some coffee for y'all, right?
yeah, that's right.
Oh wow.
Got you guys some
Thank you.
got you guys some Tribe coffee.
Love it.
I recommend all guys join a tribe
Yeah.
because that's actually what I love, that it's rugged and real.
Yeah.
I mean, that's exactly what most men look for.
Yeah.
just don't know how to do it sometimes.
That's exactly right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So thank y'all for what you're
Good
doing.
advice.
Tribe by Sebastian Younger.
Oh yeah.
Book Tribe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like primal.
Oh, it's so good.
Is it a movie? When it becomes a
Combine
movie,
it with Recalibrated.
yeah, I'll watch it when
That's-
it
yeah,
becomes a
Marie,
movie.
hey.
Yeah, exactly.
That was good, man.
No pictures in this book.
Yeah, I need some
All right.
pop-ups.
Awesome, guys.
Thanks,
Well, I know
y'all.
you guys. To find out more about what we're doing and to join us on our mission, go to men'salliancetribe.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a 5-star review.